Awesome. So the National Educational Association of Disabled Students is proud to welcome the Engineering Student Society's Council of Ontario's Inclusivity Commissioner, Anjaliya Sonnilal, as she represents inclusivity and accessibility in STEM, past, present, and future. This event is sponsored by Employment and Social Development Canada and is a feature of our Virtual Access for All webinar series. So make sure to stay tuned for upcoming events. Some quick introductions before we begin. I'm Carly Fox, Researcher and Communications Officer for NEADS, and I will be hosting our event today. Our moderator is Janique Gooden, who you have just heard from, and our host for the Q&A will be Elizabeth Moeller. Both of these lovely individuals are researchers with NEADS and the project managers of our Virtual Access for All project. We also have Frank Smith here, our national coordinator and one of the co-founders of NEADS. Good to have you here, Frank. A bit more on our speaker, Anjaliya Sonnilal. Anjaliya is ESCO's current Inclusivity Commissioner and is in her 5th year at the University of Ottawa, where she studies chemical engineering and biochemistry. With a strong focus on advocacy, Anjaliya aims to use her position to advocate for students from different marginalized groups and to amplify the voices of those who have historically been left out of the conversation. Anjaliya, I'll hand it to you.
Thank you so much, Carly, and to NEADS for having me, as well as all of you that are here. So I will begin sharing my screen. So hello, I'm here today to talk about inclusivity and accessibility in STEM. So I will be talking a little bit about what it's looked like before, what it's looked like currently, and what I would hope that it's going to look like in the future. So before I begin, I would like to acknowledge the land that we are currently on. So in the spirit and intent of truth and reconciliation, we acknowledge the traditional Indigenous territories on which we live, learn, and play. This territory is part of the Dish with One Spoon Treaty, which is an agreement between the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and allied nations to peacefully share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. By understanding and acknowledging, we wish to pay respect to Turtle Island, Mother Earth, First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people who have been living on this land since time immemorial. This land was acquired unfairly, and as settlers on this land, it is part of our collective responsibility to recognize and mitigate the oppression of Indigenous people. So for more information on land acknowledgements for your current location, since I know a lot of you are currently across Canada, and for some helpful maps, you can visit nativeland.ca. So just to kind of start it off, I will be talking about some sensitive topics about the barriers in STEM that many students with disabilities face. There will be a period of time in the present section, which includes some firsthand experiences at a university level in the form of quotations and will be addressed with sensitivity. I would also like to thank NEADS immensely for having me present this webinar, as well for all of the resources used to aid in the creation of this presentation. So I'm here on behalf of ESCO, and I wanted to introduce myself and the organization that I represent. So hello, my name is Anjaliya Sonnilal. I do use she, her pronouns. I am 20 years old, and I am the Inclusivity Commissioner for ESCO, amongst other clubs on my campus. And I am going into my 5th year of biochemistry and chemical engineering at the University of Ottawa, and I'm currently residing in Ottawa. So I've been in STEM at a university level for quite a few years now. So who is ESCO? When I say that I'm here to represent ESCO, I'm here representing the Engineering Student Societies Council of Ontario. So ESCO is an association that represents engineering societies across 16 universities in Ontario and acts as a link between the engineering students and professional associations, so that's academia and the government. Since its creation in 1987, ESCO's goal has been to promote unity, continuity, and visibility amongst Ontario engineering students. And each year we plan a series of conferences, which we send our delegates to enhance everyone's experience in engineering and so that we can all learn collectively. Advocacy in ESCO is one of the most important functions of ESCO, and it helps to serve our 3 main objectives, so our visibility and our inclusivity for engineering students. So that means that we advocate for engineering students in the province by representing students' interests to the government and provincial stakeholders, and outlining student needs and providing recommendations for their fulfillment. So for example, we have a lot of working groups that work to obtain information about different aspects of engineering student life and to help provide reports that can be sent to the university and the government in Ontario. So what do I do in my role as Inclusivity Commissioner? Most of what I do is facilitating ESCO initiatives, EDI training, and acting as a resource and a liaison between the executive team on ESCO and other EDI professionals to help ensure that we are constantly contributing to an inclusive and accessible and an equitable environment. So as a part of the EDI training that I share with our delegates and our members, ESCO partners with a variety of diversity-focused organizations to learn more and share our obtained knowledge with our ESCO executive team and with all of our delegates at our conference. So we make sure that the information that we share is constantly being shared with our community so that people have access to different resources. So now going into that, when talking a little bit about my position, I use some different definitions or words, and I will be continuously using them in the presentation. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what some of the words mean. So inclusivity, which is a part of my title, inclusivity means allowing and accommodating people who have historically been excluded and having involvement or empowerment where the inherent worth and dignity of all is recognized. So inclusivity is making sure that everyone feels like they are welcome and included in a space. Equity. Equity is justice which is free from bias or favoritism, and the absence of avoidable disadvantages amongst groups of people. So equity is not the same as equality, in where equity helps to provide everyone with resources that they need to have everyone be able to succeed in the environment that they're in. A disability. So a disability is a condition that negatively affects someone's abilities to participate in daily living activities. And a disability can be physical, mental, cognitive, or developmental. And lastly, accommodations. So accommodations are services or objects supplied to satisfy a need or provide a convenience, and works a lot with having and creating an equitable environment. So being able to supply what everyone would need to help them succeed. So talking more a little bit about disabilities, there are many different types of disabilities, and they are all different in how they're able to impact an individual. So just some examples of some disabilities are vision impairment, being deaf or hard of hearing, having a mental illness condition, having an intellectual disability, acquired brain injury, autism spectrum disorder, or a physical disability, and these are just a few to name some. There are also such things known as quote unquote invisible disabilities, and the reason that they're called invisible is because they are often overlooked. So some examples of what would be considered invisible disabilities are chronic pain, asthma, personality disorders, diabetes, chronic fatigue, amongst others. Now, I really want to focus on the difference between a mental illness versus a mental health condition. So just to talk a little bit about it more, everyone has mental health, and mental health is just our mental well-being and our emotions. So how do we react? How do we think? What are our feelings? How do we communicate with others? And overall, how we understand and put ourselves into the world. So, however, on the other hand, mental illness is an illness that affects how someone's able to think or feel or behave or interact with others. So the reason that these two words are not interchangeable is because it is possible to have poor mental health without a mental illness, and it is possible to have good mental health with a diagnosed mental illness. And another really important thing is that a mental illness is diagnosed and does provide disability. So the impact. All of these negatively impact someone's ability to participate in daily living. They just impact people in different ways. And one of the big things to know is that there is a barrier in being diagnosed for a disability, and these barriers are often based on different aspects of someone's identity. So anything from your gender, your race, your social economic status, or your sexuality, amongst others. And The barriers that society has are often human-made and create difficulties and create these barriers in the lives of disabled and neurodivergent people. So let's talk about STEM. We're here to talk about STEM, and I'm going to kind of go into the basics on what STEM means. So when I refer to STEM, I'm talking about science, technology, engineering, and math. So if you have an interest or study any of these subjects, you would be considered a major in STEM. So how is STEM introduced to young students? Every single student learns the basics of STEM at a young age, and it's to help provide a well-rounded education. So a lot of students will take science or math courses all throughout their elementary grades. If you continue on with after elementary with STEM, you can have courses offered such as biology, chemistry, physics, algebra, and calculus that delve more into specific topics underneath science, technology, engineering, and math. STEM does provide lots of opportunities in post-secondary, graduates, and in the workplace. However, one of the big problems in STEM is that it is not always accessible, which students. So we're going to be talking about the past of STEM, what it's looked like before, the present STEM, which is what it looks like now, and the future of STEM, which is where we're going. So let's talk about. So in the past, there was a very great barrier of knowledge regarding STEM accessibility. So starting as young as in elementary schools, classrooms and teachers may not have had the proper knowledge on how to better aid students with disabilities. Now, a very big example of this is how information or learning is delivered at a very young age. For the most part, it is very, very visual or physical or relies a lot on auditory, which can be from being able to choose shapes or detect colors or sing a song or participate in activities that require a lot of mobility. Now, at a very young age, when all the activities around you in your learning atmosphere are very heavily dependent on being able to participate in them, whether in a visual, auditory, or mobility sense, students with disabilities are left out from being able to participate fully, and it immediately already begins the process where they're not included in the learning. Another barrier of knowledge in STEM accessibility is harmful stereotyping. So some teachers and parents actually believe that students with disabilities may not be interested in STEM, or if a student shows interest in STEM, they believe that the material would be too challenging, and that places a barrier for students with disabilities by trying to dictate what a student with disability can or cannot do solely based on their disability. So this harmful stereotyping does prevent access from these accessibilities and from being able to participate in STEM. And lastly, STEM learning material delivery. So as someone who's been in STEM for quite a bit of time, there is a very one-way method of teaching, and it's quote unquote black and white. So it's a lot of, here's the material, memorize it, and tell us what you memorized. But it's very hard for students with disabilities to learn in that sense, where you have to just intake the information and just kind of spew it out again. And an example of this is, and how it shows at a very young age in elementary, is that a lot of the times in science, you learn how to work with plants. And one of the testings that you do is labeling the different areas of a plant. Now, if you have not been provided the resources to be able to understand why memorizing that was important, or having accommodations to be able to help you show that you understand the information in a different way, you are penalized for not being able to do this one-way method of teaching. And unfortunately, STEM rarely offers an alternative for how you can have testing in STEM, or how you can show that you understand information, which leaves a lot of students with disabilities behind. In the past, there was not much space for advocacy regarding students with disabilities, and often a lot of students with disabilities and people with disabilities in general have been left out of the conversation, especially in a STEM environment. And even if people were able to go on to pursue secondary or graduate studies, there were even less and limited accessibility services continuing on in STEM faculties, which ended up with students with disabilities having a very little support system, and often had many students with disabilities feeling like they could not continue to be successful in STEM despite obtaining a degree. In fact, if you think about it, in Canada in terms of legislation, it was only in 2005 that the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disability Act was passed, and it was only in 2019 that the Accessible Canada Act came into force. And if you think about it, 2019 was only 2.5 years ago, and these legislation and policies are there to now bring more light to students with disabilities and more of a platform to people with disabilities. But that was only 2.5 years ago, so we still have quite a way to learn and grow to make spaces more accommodating and inclusive. So to talk a little bit more about STEM now, what does it look like as a university major myself? Well, there has been improvement to services regarding accessibility and opening the space for discussion for students with disabilities, but we still do have a long way to go before STEM becomes inclusive and accessibility. So some of the improvements that I've seen myself, even in the last 4 years that I've been enrolled in university, is that there have been improvements to accessibility accommodations for university students. So for example, you can now register within your university for accessibility accommodations, which can provide services such as note-taking, extra time for examinations, alternate examinations if you need, or a separate space for you to be able to take your examinations to help you succeed in your studies. However, even with these accommodations, it's not perfect, and STEM as a field still lacks a lot of accommodations, both for learning and physical accessibility. So talking specifically about learning accessibilities at a university level, while there are accessibility accommodations in place and the service exists, it is very hard to access, and it is often can feel like an invasive process to get these services. So for example, you will not be approved for an accessibility accommodation in most universities in Ontario unless you're able to provide a medical note for it. And going through the process of having to tell many different specialists at your university about your diagnosis as a student with a disability can take a lot of energy to constantly have to advocate for yourself as a student with a disability, and needing to constantly provide medical documentation for you to be taken seriously as a student with a disability at a university level can re-stigmatize these students and make them feel like the amount of work they have to put in is not going to pay out and actually help them. And often when you're communicating with academic services, which takes a lot of people that you have to talk to when you're constantly being moved around from specialist to specialist, the reasoning for your medical circumstance that you would have liked to keep a secret, especially if it was invasive to go through the process of having to tell a specialist, sometimes that privacy is not always respected at a university level. And in the past, in the last 3 or 4 years, I've seen many times where the academic services sometimes tell the professors a student's disability and their reason for the accommodation, which takes away that student's privacy. So like one way that we could change it is that instead of saying that someone is using a service for a specific medical reason, just saying that a student is using a service, because there should never have to be a reason where everyone needs to know what a student's disability is in order to accommodate them and treat them with respect. Regarding more about learning accessibilities at a university level, these accommodations have very long wait lists to get into, and sometimes you're being transferred or it takes 2 weeks for an email to get back to you, and having to constantly wait or be told different information when you're trying to obtain a service can be very frustrating and can even amplify how you feel about the situation at hand. So for a lot of students with disabilities, just the fact that they have to be put on a wait list for their accessibility accommodations deters a lot of students from wanting to get them. And even worse is that let's say a student with a disability went through all of the effort and all of the exhausting process of obtaining an accessibility accommodation. And they got the medical known, they have a specialist, and they have been offered an accommodation for their studies. Some professors are not accommodating, or they proceed to ask invasive questions or put the students on the spot. So I'm going to be sharing some quotes in the next few slides that have been said to students on my campus, and be talking a little bit more about why these quotes are harmful to students with disabilities. And these have all been said by professors. So the first quote is I forgot your accommodation. What is it? And what is the reason that you are registered for an accommodation? Now, when you're being told as a student with a disability that someone is continuously forgetting accommodation that you worked very hard to obtain because it would help you in your studies, it really feels like you're not being respected and that your accommodation is not worth someone else's time to just remember or make a note of, and constantly having to chase your professors to ask them about their accommodation, say, hey, did you put my accommodation on my test? Will I be getting my accommodation for an assignment? Is a lot of work on the student and a lot of responsibility on the student. And it really doesn't help to mitigate the barriers that are in place that prevent students with disabilities from being able to comfortably succeed. And when you have to ask the students why they're registered for accommodations, you are not respecting their privacy or who they are as a person, because again, as a professor, you do not need to know what a student's diagnosis is or what a student with a disability is in order for you to respect the fact that they have an accommodation and respect the fact that it is none of your business what their accommodation is. So this is something that a lot of professors, especially those who have continued to be studying at universities for several years, still struggle with understanding the impact of what they may think is a harmful question to ask, or harmless question to ask, but can actually be harmful and put the student with a disability in a very, very uncomfortable spot. So next, we're going to talk about the idea of the quote that you don't look like you need accommodations, and STEM is a very quick-paced field and companies cannot afford to work at your pace. So to break this down into kind of two different discussions, the idea of you don't quote unquote look like you need an accommodation goes back into harmful stereotyping and the idea that many people who do not have disabilities tend to put stereotypes on what they expect a student with a disability to quote unquote look like, or what accommodations they would think that student with a disability needs. And that harmful stereotyping means that even though we all talked about how disabilities look very different for many different people, it is putting everyone with a disability in one box. And if you put everyone in one box, you cannot provide everyone with the specific accommodation that they need. And it does not help everyone. So kind of going back to our definition about equity, equity is making sure that everyone has everything they specifically need. But with the quote, like, you don't look like you need accommodations, you're really putting everyone with a disability in one box. And when they're all in one box and you treat them all as if they need the same accommodations, they're not going to succeed in the same ways, because it is definitely a very big multi-leveled discussion at hand and will need different specialties. Going into the second part of this quote, so saying that STEM is a very quick-paced field and company cannot afford to work at your pace. So this is a quote that you will hear a lot in STEM, and it's the idea that STEM is quick, and if you cannot catch up, you will be left behind. And you are told this from the minute you are in first year, no matter who you are in STEM. And a lot of universities, what they do, unfortunately, in your first year of university, is they have a method which is called weeding out students. So they purposely make their curriculum very hard, or their learning assessments very hard in your first year of university, to say that if you were unable to keep up with this pace that a lot of students cannot keep up with, that you are not equipped to be in STEM. Now, as a student without a disability, this is already very hard to keep up with, and it puts down a lot of students, and it does deter a lot of students in general from wanting to study in STEM. But even more so, when you're addressing a student with a disability with this idea in mind, not only are you saying that you're not willing to give them the accommodation to work at the pace that the company's moving at, but that you don't think that they are worth the respect of being even considered for the fast pace that STEM is. And this goes into the whole idea of the fact that STEM is very one method. It is, you all are expected to learn the same and understand the same. And if you can't, you are not worth it to be in STEM. And it's very, very harmful for a lot of students with disabilities, especially because someone's disability was never their choice and they're doing the best that they can with their situation. And this harmful behavior that a lot of professors and a lot of people in STEM have is is a very big barrier for students with disabilities. Lastly, for my quotes, this is still a quote that absolutely shocks me sometimes, but it was a quote that says, "It is not my responsibility to find you accommodations, such as a note taker. Your accommodations are your responsibilities." There have been professors, especially at my university, who have not respected the fact that a student has accommodations. And even though it is the professor's job to help the student obtain their accommodations in their class, some professors will reject this request, even though it is approved by the university. And this can, again, make the student feel like all the work they went through to have their disability be recognized and to really vouch for themselves to obtain accommodations was a whole bunch of effort to only make it to the classroom and still be denied your accommodations, or have to put yourself more and share more of your information that you may not feel comfortable with in order to obtain what is rightfully yours, especially if you worked very hard to obtain your accommodations. Even more so, what our expectation for a lot of academic services and accessibility services on campuses is that the reason that they tell the professor is so that the professor can anonymously ask the class for such services, such as a note taker. And when you place this responsibility on the student with a disability, you are placing them where they have to share their disability with their peers, which is something that a lot of students, especially young adults with disabilities, do not want to do, because unfortunately, going back to stereotypes, it makes them feel isolated in STEM, and STEM can already feel very isolating as a student with a disability. So these are all very harmful things that professors say that they may not understand really hurt and really deny the accessibility for students with disabilities, and is something that is happening a little too often at a university level. So that's more on kind of like a learning disability side. So now I'm going to be talking more about physical accessibility at a university level. So one of the lovely things about university is that auditoriums are very small and very tightly packed. So classroom auditoriums at a university level are meant to have anywhere from 100 students to 500 students, depending on the auditorium size. Now, with this, all the chairs are very small, they're very packed together. The desks that are attached to them are often have limited mobility, and all of these can cause a lot of discomfort for students with physical disabilities. And even more so, which is never really talked about enough, is that in STEM classrooms or STEM auditoriums, there's often maybe 4 accessible seats for students. And if you think about the idea that out of a classroom of 500, there are 4 accessible seats for students, that is not painting the picture of accessibility that many universities think it is, because it's the idea that you're doing a very little thing for students with disabilities and thinking you've done everything, whereas really the idea it's painting for students with disabilities is that at maximum, we can accommodate 4 of you physically. That is how many seats we're giving you, and that is firstly very terrifying as a student with disability, to feel like you are a number and feel like you are a very small number at that, and also feel like there's just not enough respect for your disability, that is all they can offer. So I think in terms of classroom auditoriums, we have a lot in which we can accommodate students a lot better. Going into how material is delivered at a university level, there are lots of projectors and speakers and it can be very overstimulating, both in a visual and auditory sense. For example, if you have to sit very far in the back of the class, you may be closer to a speaker, which is a lot louder, and you may be further from a projector, which means that the text is smaller and hard to read. And with the lights in the room and everything, it can just be very overstimulating. And if you're a student with disability, you may need to leave the classroom if the environment is not accommodating enough or inclusive enough to be comfortable for you. So moving on to this is a lot of professors at a university level do what is called quote unquote fill in the blank method. And in this method, they provide students with a hard copy of the notes, so a printed copy or a copy on their computer where students can fill in the important keywords or important things that they need to know that will be in examinations in the class that the professor will either talk about or will share on the screen. Now, if you are a student with a disability and this is very overstimulating for you, you will not end up being able to fill in all the blanks, and this will leave you feeling behind, and especially if you learn in a different sense, and if you had to leave the room because it was uncomfortable for you, it is very hard to be able to obtain these notes later. So it leaves a lot of students with disabilities feeling very behind in a university setting and feeling like it's impossible to catch up. Regarding more physical accessibilities at a university level, one of the biggest things as a STEM major are laboratories. Now, laboratories are mandatory for every single first year. So whether you are in engineering, whether you are in science, taking computer sciences, most students do take a first year laboratory session, if not for all the years of your program. I'm going into my 5th year, I think about my 12th semester at the University of Ottawa, and I've had laboratories every single semester, every single year. It's a part of being a STEM major. However, laboratory spaces are very difficult with accessibility. One is that laboratory spaces are often very small. So you would have maybe about a group of 14 in one laboratory session, which means you're often being very close with another individual. You're working in a very small space, sharing a lot of the same projects. And the formatting of this makes it very difficult for students who may need physical support in the lab. And an example of this is that if you are a student with a disability who, for example, needs a person of assistance or a service animal to help you in the lab, if you are working at the same lab as everyone else, you can actually be denied these access to your physical support because of the laboratory space. And this denial is a barrier for students with disabilities who may need that person of assistance or that animal to be able to properly do an experiment. And even more so in laboratory spaces, there's often only maybe one elevator that is very slow, and if not, you're using multiple stairs to get to your laboratory, and these are all very limiting for students with physical disabilities. So kind of continuing with that topic in mind, a lot of buildings in general around campus, again with special regards to laboratories since it is a very STEM-dominated place to study, often lack the other accessibility features such as Braille, and this can deter a lot of students with disabilities from being provided the necessary tools to succeed. So my example of this is that if you are in a laboratory, there's no Braille, first of all, and if you are trying to differentiate between chemicals that you are using, it is actually a lot harder than it should be. For example, a lot of the bottles are the exact same color, the exact same style, the exact same weight, which means that the only way that you can differentiate between maybe a corrosive or a non-corrosive chemical that you're using, or a chemical that will help amplify your results of the lab or completely ruin your lab, you have to be able to read the label. A lot of the chemicals in labs are not necessarily labeled as well as they should be, meaning that the text is very small or hard to read. And if you are a student with disability who has visual impairment, who is not allowed to have a person of assistance on the lab, you would have no way of being able to differentiate between which chemicals you're using. And in a lot of laboratory studies you're using multiple chemicals. So it can become very dangerous, and it becomes very dangerous, especially for students with disabilities who are trying to study in STEM. So being online, since the pandemic, a lot of universities have changed to a online atmosphere where we're completely virtually for the last year and a half, and that has affected STEM in the present day. So the transition to online learning, it had many challenges in general because we just had a lack of experience with a virtual setting. But a lot of the things that were facilitated online placed more challenges, especially for students with disabilities. Now you may be thinking, like, what are some of these challenges? Well, one of the big things is the online testing and anti-cheating software. Many universities decided to buy into an anti-cheating software that would monitor students from their own home to help protect quote-unquote academic integrity. Now, one of the features of this program is a software that can track students' eye movements and will flag a student for cheating if their eyes were moving more than the average amount. Now, the idea that the program was first of all made average based on students without disabilities meant that students with disabilities that affected their vision and thus had a lot of uncontrollable eye movements were unnecessarily flagged for cheating and put into a lot of uncomfortable academic situations where they had to explain that they did not commit academic fraud and that the system was flagging them solely based on their disability. And that put a lot of students in a very difficult place to be in, especially because majority of the students who were flagged for quote unquote online cheating were just students with disabilities who could not control the fact that the software was not made or tested to accommodate them. And it was a very difficult time for a lot of universities because a lot of students with disabilities felt that the university was not understanding enough and was not trying to accommodate them, but were trying to unnecessarily and unfairly penalize them. Now, secondly, the virtual setting. We talked a lot about how because students with disabilities are all different, and that means that we will all learn in a different way. For students who did prefer or did work better and understand better in a hands-on manner, it means that being able to engage was a lot harder. You're no longer in a lab working with chemicals, you're watching someone on YouTube do it for you in an online setting. And that's very hard to engage in and to understand properly, especially if you are a student with disability who needs to learn and work with it through yourself. So, and online has pushed a lot of the responsibility onto students to learn material in general. And there's few accommodations or supports to help students with disabilities be able to excel in an online setting, especially since a lot of the discussions around virtual settings were predominantly based on students without disabilities. So what are some things we've learned online? Online hasn't been as terrible as it could have been, and it has taught us about a few better ways to have accommodations. So, for example, if you were in person prior, most lectures were not recorded in an auditorium, which meant if you were not able to attend a lecture, you missed the material of that lecture, and it was your responsibility to find what you missed. However, with the shift to online, a lot of lectures are now recorded and uploaded onto the internet, meaning that students who used to not be able to follow along with missed material now have the ability to watch and understand material at their own pace, which is something that is really great for students with disabilities who may have needed that extra support or those extra resources. Another thing is that closed captioning is available online. So, for example, at our Zoom event right now, we do have closed captioning, as well as on lecture recordings are closed captioning so that students with disabilities can follow along easier. However, closed captioning is not always perfect, and there are many ways that closed captioning can still be improved to have more understanding. So with all of this in mind, and with all of this being accessibility and inclusivity for students with disabilities in the present, I just want to talk about what we can do in the future to create a better space and more room to talk about STEM for students with disabilities. So accessibility in STEM, it has a very long way to go before STEM can become inclusive to students with disabilities. But knowing where to start or what you can do now is the first step. So for one, providing the support and safe spaces for students with disabilities is very important. When we talked about the past, we talked about how there was not enough space for students with disabilities to be included in the conversation and actually explain why things may or may not work or may limit students with disabilities. So having that safe space for students or people with disabilities to share their disability and be able to obtain support for it is one of the ways that I'd love to see in the future where we can make more of an inclusive environment. And including people with disabilities in the conversation and in policy making. So whether this be at a university, provincial, federal level, in businesses and laboratories, including people with disabilities is a very big aspect for it. For example, if people with disabilities were more included in the process of developing laboratory spaces, they would be able to advocate for having larger spaces, more room for accessibility, other specific accommodations as they see fit, which are often overlooked by people without disabilities who make a lot of these plans. This also includes not talking over students with disabilities. So you cannot welcome a student with a disability into a space to share how you can better accommodate them and then also bring them down when they talk about an accommodation they need. So when we were talking about online proctoring, about the eye tracking software, even though a lot of students with disabilities were very upset and went through the effort of explaining to the administration why this was very harmful and why this specifically impacted students with disabilities, the university often said, well, this is in place for all students. This is in place to, make sure that we prevent cheating for everyone to quote unquote protect the good students. And this was actually a quote that was said to me many times when talking about the online proctoring. And one of the reasons is that if you're going to invite a student to share why a software doesn't work or why it's not accessible, you cannot then turn back and say, oh, well, we put this in place for everyone, because you're diminishing the fact that a student with a disability is putting themselves in a space to help teach you and help so that you can learn to better accommodate others around you. And only talking over them does not help them and does not make them want to share, want to be a part of the conversation anymore. This is also really important so that in positions of leadership that you don't only have an inclusivity commissioner, such as myself, and keep them in a box where you dictate what their position is supposed to mean. If you have someone who is in an accessibility position, allowing them to freely use their position to help with accommodations as they see needed, especially with their own experience, is very important. So other things we can do is encourage and accommodate students with disabilities throughout any aspect of their education. So that means starting very young, being able to accommodate students with disabilities in elementary school, helping support them in the field of STEM throughout elementary going into high school. So helping make science fairs more accessible, make science field trips more accessible so that students with disabilities can feel like they have an opportunity to learn and love STEM, because STEM is so interesting and it's so fundamental to help this world go round that it's amazing to be able to teach young students with disabilities that there is a place for them in STEM and that their impact is going to be very huge as long as we provide them with the resources to succeed in STEM. And lastly, I want to talk about having just more representation of disabled communities in leadership positions, because only students and people with disabilities can tear down the barriers that are currently in place by educating. And that means being an ally and being a supporter for people with disabilities who are in leadership positions and having respect and understanding why they explain that some things may be barriers and helping tear down policy barriers or physical barriers to help make everything more accessible, as well as to help diminish all the stereotypes that create a very negative light for students and people with disabilities, and inspire a generation of students with disabilities who want to pursue STEM and change the world. So that is all for my presentation. Thank you so much for listening to me. And if you have any questions about maybe something I may have said or something that you're just a little curious about, the floor is now open, or you can also email me at inclusivity@esco.ca, which is also on our website.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Anjaliya, for that incredible presentation. Your passion for STEM and inclusivity and accessibility was so evident. I will now be handing it over to Elizabeth Moeller, who will be facilitating the Q&A portion of the event.
Thank you so much. So my name is Elizabeth Muller and I'm a researcher with NEADS. I'm going to start by asking Anjaliya some questions, but also please feel free if you have questions, pop them in the chat box and I will be happy to read them. So just to kick us off, Anjaliya, could you kindly tell us a little bit about any advice you would give to an incoming student who wants to do STEM, has a disability, and is maybe a little bit concerned about some of the barriers they might face?
Yes, I would love to. So one of my big things, or big words of advice, I would say, for students with disabilities is that you putting yourself out there into leadership positions and talking with your university and your professors and administration and explaining to them about your passion and about what you need to succeed would really help to have professors kind of understand. And unfortunately, it does mean that it's a lot on a student with a disability themselves to have to go out and, explain why, even though in a perfect world, a student with this disability should not have to explain why, but really putting yourself into leadership positions or talking with either your student union, your society at your school. A lot of societies at schools have positions for advocacy. So if you may not want to directly go to the administration yourself, there's a lot of support within your own peers who want to see you succeed. And this goes back to being an ally for students with disabilities and really helping them advocate. So find those people who are willing to advocate for you. Just as I tell engineering students in Ontario, if you are having trouble with accessibility, message me and I will bother your administration for you and I will keep you private because that is what I'm here to do. So a lot of students with disabilities can find that person. There's one on every campus and every program. And I would really recommend to start with that, as well as to reach out to your academic accommodation services to talk to a specialist on how they can help better.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. And what would you say to a student who is maybe in STEM, they've gotten into the program and they're facing barriers or they're facing obstacles and they're not sure where to turn and they're feeling like maybe STEM isn't for them because of those barriers?
Yeah, that's another great question. Unfortunately, it is very common where students with disabilities end up in a part where their degree where they feel like they cannot pursue STEM anymore because it's just gotten too difficult, or constantly having to fight for your accommodation and not having it respected is exhausting. And a lot of students figure that they don't want to pursue. So again, I'd say your accommodation services on your campus is there to help you. So I'd really reach out to them. But at the same time, if they cannot, finding those people on your university who are students who have maybe a little more power in their own administration, government, or within their faculty can help, because if you have maybe a petition that's going around and being able to anonymously tell someone what support you need or what accesses are being denied to you, it can help to change policies. Because if there's one thing I've learned is universities will change with peer pressure. So at worst, find someone to help amplify your voice and really pressure the universities, because every single student with a disability has a place in STEM, and I want them to know that they do.
That's fantastic. And we know mentorship is so critical and so key to success. How might students with disabilities who want to receive a mentor in STEM go about doing that? And do you know of any resources?
Well, for some mentors on STEM, there are the accommodation services. So they can partner you with someone who maybe understands your disability a little more, or to help you talk to a specialist. However, I would actually like to kind of plug NEADS for a second. NEADS does absolutely amazing work with accessibility and being able to provide mentors. And you do a lot of studies in your organization that would really help students understand mentorship and who they might be able to talk to. So if your university maybe is not helping you as you would like, reach out to NEADS. They have great resources and they have amazing people who will have your back and support you.
Thank you. That's very kind. And I do have one final question. I'm not seeing any in the chat box. keep my eyes open. I wondered about resources around accessible science labs that you might know of if a student is looking for some guidance for a faculty member or a staff member at a university around accessible science labs.
Yes, absolutely. So one of the ways I've seen it be combated in a few universities is when you're able to talk to a lab coordinator. And for example, one of the reasons why it is very hard to have a person of assistance or like a service animal in a laboratory space is because at the time of the laboratory, there's 14, 15 students in your lab session, maybe 100 doing the lab at the same time that you are. So sometimes what professors are able to offer is a different time for you to be able to do your experiment with a person of assistance on your own time. So it would be an entirely empty laboratory space, and they would be able to have you have a lab coordinator who can help you with the experiment. So that is one way that I've seen it be able to be accommodated. And another way is that if you are unable to maybe do the experiment, but you have the necessary knowledge to perform it, you can either explain it in a type of presentation rather than perform the experiment to show that you understand what the experiment results, or there are different programs that professors are able to offer that would provide you a more accommodating experience, which is not necessarily the same lab as your peers, but still give you experience within the science workplace to be able to show that you have STEM knowledge.
That's great.
And we've got some questions in the chat here. So Anne's just mentioned that in BC, it's actually the responsibility of the Accessibility Office to find a note taker, not the responsibility of students with disabilities. So we have a question from Kate around funding.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Researchers. And how can we attract student researchers to these types of roles or awards?
I am so sorry. Part of that cut out, so I didn't get the entire question.
Okay, what I said was Caitlin had commented that there's funding for student researchers with disabilities, and how could we maybe attract more students to these types of roles or positions? And then I had also mentioned, I don't know if all of that cut out, that Anne had mentioned that in BC, it's the responsibility of accessible education to find someone to take notes for a student who has a disability.
Yep. So thank you for the question. First of all, just to kind of reply to Anne, it should be the responsibility of the administration to find someone to help with accessibility, such as with notes. So kind of like that question where the prof says it's your responsibility, it should never be the responsibility of the student with a disability to have their accommodations respected. But to answer the question a little more, so again, so NEADS actually does have a few awards and researchers opportunities for students with disabilities, as well as many different universities have specific organizations on their campus or specific awards for students with disabilities to be able to pursue education. And in order to attract students for these research roles, I think is a lot of exposure. These awards exist, but the problem is people do not know they exist because there's constantly an atmosphere that's deterring students with disabilities from participating. So there's not enough exposure about all the opportunities that do exist. So I think one of the really great ways is that if the university on their academic services page had a section or on their financial awards page that said, if you are a student with a disability, here are ways that we can help you financially. Here are ways that we can support you through scholarships or opportunities. And talking about it more, most universities at Welcome Week share a presentation about here's everything our university has to offer. And I think that sharing that there are a lot of opportunities for students with disabilities that are kind of kept more quiet and underground, having those be shared in student organizations and in university levels and just in administration. So I would definitely recommend that just universities advertise it more because it's there and it's meant to help.
Awesome. I'm so sorry. I know we have more questions in the chat, but in the interest of time, I'm going to have to wrap things up. If anyone does have any remaining questions, please send them to our moderator, Janique Gooden, and we will make sure they get to Anjaliya. I would like to once again thank everyone for coming, and thank you, Anjaliya, for being such a fantastic guest. There is clearly such a strong interest in accessibility in STEM, which we will keep in mind as we move forward in our virtual Access for All project. Before you're all on your way, I have just a few quick needs updates to share. We will be hosting Elizabeth Moeller and Lisa Kelly for their presentation, Transitions to Work for People with Disabilities, August 4th at 12 p.m. EST. A link to the Zoom registration will be posted in the chat box below. If you are a student with a disability, NEADS would love to discuss your experiences with accessibility and accommodations with you. These interviews will inform our State of the Schools report, a quarterly release detailing how campuses are serving their students with disabilities. To schedule an interview, you can contact Elizabeth Moeller, Ginny Gooden, or myself. Our emails will be posted in the chat box. And to stay up to date with all of NEADS' upcoming projects, make sure to follow us on social media. Links to our accounts will be posted in the chat box below. Awesome. Thank you again, Anjaliya. Fantastic event.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. And Frank, you are good to stop recording.